talking about how to have a devotional time. And why is that important? All of us face the challenges of life. But I mentioned this last week, Proverbs 4:23. This is not on your sheet. We'll get to the sheet in a minute. Proverbs 4:23, guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. How many know everything that happens on the outside of us starts on the inside? And how we respond to everything in life, it starts on the inside. So, my attitude, my behavior, and how I respond to all of the things that come into my life, into my marriage, into my relationship with my children, on my job, with my friends, with the circumstances that rise up unforeseen. How many know it all starts inside of us? In fact, Jesus said in a different way something similar to what the author there of Proverbs 4 said. Jesus said in Matthew 4:4, man will not live, or people won't live by bread alone, not just natural food, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. And when he said that, you know what he was really saying? He said you have more than just physical needs. You also have spiritual needs. If all you do is meet your physical needs, then you're going to be lacking. And listen, in American culture, we have a lot of empty people today. They're empty on the inside, and they're looking for something external to satisfy something on the inside that only God can satisfy. How many know that? God made us in His image and after His likeness. In fact, of the 6 days of creation, that last day when He created man, we are the only part of creation created in the image of God. We did not evolved from one cell amoeba in the ocean. We were created by the hand of God, and He scooped some common clay up and made it into the image of a physical body, and then breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We were created to fellowship with God, and there's something in us that cries out for something bigger than us, something on the outside of us, something grander than us, and His name is Jesus, and He's the Son of God the Father, who is awesome and huge. Isn't that awesome to think about? So here's the deal. Today, in American culture, what is in vogue is exercise. You turn on the TV, exercise, all kinds of announcements about exercise. You tool around online, all kinds of stuff about exercise equipment. The latest, the greatest, the best. You can be buff and toned. Exercise. Come on. Be the best you can be. Well, you know what? You can look like Hercules. You can be the biggest, grandest. You can be the buffest and tonest. But you know what? Sometimes the biggest, greatest guy is not ready to deal with the problems life brings. Because there's a lot on the outside, but they're empty inside. And what I'm advocating for here, starting the year in 2018, let's work on our relationship with the Lord. Let's build ourselves up inside. Because here's the way life is. You never know when crisis is coming. I mean, tomorrow you can wake up and something can land in your life that puts your head where your feet were just the day before. Now, as a pastor, I've been in ministry since 1981 and a pastor since 1988. And let me just tell you what I've seen. I've been with people in the best things that life brings when they get promotions and their business is blessed or something wonderful happens in their family. They have a newborn or whatever, or they get married. It's just wonderful times of life. I've also been at people in some of the toughest times that life brings, when challenges come, when accidents happen, when hell lands in a family's lap. And I've seen two things happen. I've seen people seemingly, so to speak, go berserk. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn because they're unprepared for the tests life brings. I've got a book in my library. It was written in the late 70s by a wonderful man of God. And its title is Ready or Not, Here Comes Trouble. So I always have the question, I have to question me regularly. Am I ready if trouble lands at my doorstep? Ask yourself, are you ready if trouble lands? I've also had families that I've worked with that when trouble lands, you know what? One person would bring me to the side and they'd say, in so many words, Pastor, this is going to be all right. Because they had something inside to answer the challenge. Ask yourself today, what do you have inside to answer the challenges of life? This is very practical today. has been the last 2 weeks. Today is about as practical as I know how to get. I want to talk to you really about how to get closer to the Lord. And it comes with your devotional time with God. Getting close to the Lord is not coming to a church service, not going to a prayer service. It's what you do by yourself behind closed doors that makes the difference in whether you're or not you're full or empty, prepared or ill-prepared for the issues of life that come up. How many hear what I'm saying? So, we've talked about a number of things here. The first Sunday, a couple of weeks ago, talked about 5 circles of closeness that surrounded Jesus. There were 5 levels of intimacy with him during his ministry in the 4 Gospels. As you read them, the multitudes surrounded Jesus everywhere he went. There are hundreds of descriptions of the multitude in the 4 Gospels. And the multitudes followed Jesus, and they were basically wanting to see a miracle, see a sign, see a wonder, see somebody that was deaf hear or blind see, or somebody that was crippled walk. They would just want to see something that would tantalize the senses. And so they could say, wow, you know what I saw? But they had no commitment to him. They had no commitment to his ministry. In fact, when Jesus really got to preaching and teaching, they'd take off and walk away. In fact, many times it would say many left him and no longer followed him. They had no commitment. That's the multitude. Where are you in this? And then 70 people surrounded Jesus. He chose 70 people, then sent them out in groups of 35 groups of 2, and they ministered on his behalf. They had a closeness with Jesus the multitudes didn't have. They knew him, but if you've got 70 people and one guy talking, you're only going to get so close. So where are you? And then Jesus chose 12 disciples. They experienced things that the 70 didn't and the multitudes never would. The 12 disciples heard him preach things. They saw him minister in ways that others didn't. And then from there, Peter, James, and John, there's another circle. And they understood and they saw things. They heard things from Jesus' lips that nobody else heard. They had a closeness with Jesus that the 12 didn't, that the 70 didn't, nor obviously the multitude didn't. And then from the 3 there emerged one. And in the gospel that he wrote, John's gospel, he refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. It's not that Jesus was a respect of persons and just he was his pet. No. He more fully responded to the love that Jesus showed the multitudes, the 70, the 12, the 3, the 1. So I have to ask myself, what level am I responding to Jesus in my life? Where are you in your life? Are you the 1, the 12, the 3, the 70, the multitude? Where are you? All of us are somewhere. How many know this time next year you could be closer into him? How many want that? So I want to show us kind of how to get there. So I talked about this. I've mentioned these things. And I mentioned J. Oswald Sanders in his book, Intimacy with God, made this comment. We are at any time as close to God as we choose to be. It's our choice, not his. Draw near to God, James said, and he will draw near to you. Last week we began talking about just the principles of having a daily devotional time with God that really will make a difference in your life. And last week I mentioned these, and they're on your sheet here, 4 principles to boost a strong desire for a devotional time. Number 1, frequent contact develops closeness. And I talked about that last week. The more frequently you talk to somebody, the more deeper the conversation becomes. Is that true? And it's that true in our natural life. It's true with the Lord as well. And we went into some detail on that. Spiritual strength has to be renewed daily. We expend spiritual energy. I exercise a good bit. I cycle on the Neuse River Trail. And if I go several hours riding my bike at a certain speed, I am worn out. Sometimes I expend over 2,000 calories. That's a whole day's supply for most people. And you know what I have to do? I have to go eat because I wore myself out. And I have to get my energy reserves back up again. Spiritually, we're expending energy every day, just resisting the flesh, the world, the devil, and all the things around us in our culture that are so against the God that we love. And so spiritual strength has to be renewed day by day. Time with God creates spiritual power. We talked about that last week and talked about how that works out. You'll receive power when the Holy Spirit's come upon you. And then last week we mentioned making time with Jesus first priority in our day. And I gave you a true story from my own life. In my early 20s, God dealt with me one day, and he basically said to me, what's first in your life, make first in your day. I was not a morning person. I stayed up late at night usually. Susan, her best time of the day is at night. Is that true? I told him first service, I'm sorry. Sometimes she'll be vacuuming 11 o'clock at night. Or clean the house, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock. It's like, man, you ever want to go to bed? But she's just more awake and alert then, and that's just the way her body works. I was kind of that way, but God challenged me. Mitch, I want you to start your day with me. When God said that was a big challenge for me. I had to change my personal habits. And I started mentioning this last week. Go back to the website and you can listen to that again. And if look under now, and we'll talk about today the things you fill in. 4 practical suggestions for a great personal time with God. My heart goal here is to get us all ready for whatever the future brings to us. How many want to be ready for what comes up? To do that, you need to have a close relationship and fellowship with the Lord. And it's as simple as having a daily time with God. Number 1, I mentioned this last week, start slowly. For me, when God said, start your day with me, I said, well, how do I do that? And He reminded me of when I started getting my body in shape. I was so out of shape trying to run a mile. I could only go 1/8 of a mile, got a stitch in my side, and then I had to walk the rest of the mile with my tail tucked between my legs because I was so out of shape. But I finally listen, and here's what I found out. God just made your body about like a machine. And I didn't win any world records, but I did start jogging 5 miles in 40 minutes. That's an 8-minute mile. And I did it day after day after day, 4 or 5 times a week for a long time until I started cycling for exercise. And God showed me way back when I was in my early 20s, if you can discipline your physical body, you can discipline your spiritual life. And I had to take the same discipline that I used for my physical life into my spiritual life. And it really worked. And here's what He showed me to do. Start slow. Start slowly. So I really did start getting up 10 minutes early. I would get up at 6. I started getting up at 10 minutes till 6. But that means I went to bed 10 minutes till 11. Started going to bed a little earlier. Just break habits a little bit at a time. If I'd have tried to do what I did, again, I mentioned this last week in my Bible school days, we found out John Wesley, Charles Finney, some of these revivalist guys, they would get up the wee hours of the morning, 4 o'clock, 4:30. So a bunch of my Bible school friends and I, we got up at 4:30. We're going to pray like John Wesley for 3 hours. Here we go. 15 minutes, we're drooling on the pillow. We're praying over on the chair. We fell asleep. So, we figured out, and we just gave it up as a bad job. Couldn't do that, But you know what? God dealt with me, and I found out inch by inch. My mama, he taught me this as a little boy. Inch by inch, it's a cinch. Yard by yard is very hard. Y'all have heard that. So, a little bit at a time. So for me, I started getting up 10 minutes early, spending 5 minutes praying, 5 minutes in the Word. And I did that till I was no longer satisfied, several weeks. And then inwardly I got dissatisfied. I got to do more, so it turned into 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, until for many decades now, I have gotten up at 4:30 in the morning. And it wasn't hard to do it, just a little bit at a time over a period of months. And a year or so, that changed. Until the inward desire got so strong that I just wanted to get up earlier, and I started to go into bed at 9:30 at night so I could get up at 4:30 in the morning. I've generally held to that practice for many decades, and I want to tell you it saved my life. It saved my life. And I found out some things in doing that. So number 1, start slowly. Number 2, discipline yourself to be awake and alert. Everybody say awake and alert. When I used to get up, I was just groggy. And so when God said, make me first in your day and have a personal time with me before you start your day. And the idea behind this is, if we're spiritual beings related to the invisible God, then put your spiritual nature first. How many know when you die, your spirit goes into eternity? And so our spirit nature is the eternal part of us. And our spirit nature is what causes our body to thrive. James 2 said, your body without your spirit is dead. So your spirit gives life. Your insides give life to your outward person. Why not put that inward person first? So, start slowly. And then secondly, when you do it, remain alert and awake. For me, I had to discipline my body. And here's what I did. I found out real quick, if I get up in the morning, or even 10 minutes early, I was so groggy, I just fall asleep. I literally drooled on my Bible page. I was praying, and I found myself snoring. That's not praying, that's snoring, that's sleeping. And you know what I had to do? I got up, I walked around, and listen, I got in a spare room, no kidding, really did it. Got in a spare room, read walking back and forth. And then reading out loud. You ever read something and said, what did I just read? I forgot. Because your mind's wandering. Well, my mind would do that. So I read out loud. It's hard for your mind to wander when you read out loud. You know what I was doing? I didn't realize I was disciplining my natural person to receive spiritual things. So I just started doing it. I'd walk back and forth to pray, and to read, and I would read out loud. And that helped me. In fact, I mentioned Jerry Savelle, a wonderful man of God from Texas, came to our Bible school in, I think, 1977, 1978. And he said when he first started developing the discipline of the daily time with God, he would go in his bathroom and stand on the bathtub so that if he fell asleep, he'd fall and hurt himself. And he didn't want to hurt, so he didn't go to sleep. And then he mentioned he read out loud. So I never had to go to that extreme, but I did walk. And then praying's the same way. I'd walk back and forth to pray. And I found out that you can stay alert and awake. And now, here it is decades later, 40 years later. And now, for instance, this morning, I sat down and I read. I didn't have to read out loud because my body disciplined itself. I don't get groggy and sleepy. I just read. I read. Every once in a while I get that way. If I go to bed late, there's an extenuating circumstance that keeps me up. So if that's the case, sometimes I may need to stand up. But you know what? Generally, you can how many know your body will do what you let it do? What you train it to do. So disciplining yourself to be alert and awake. Number 3, I'm going to spend some time on this one. Find a Bible reading plan. Everybody say Bible reading plan. Now this is really important. Plans aid motivation. Listen to this. First job I had in ministry after my second Bible school, I was working at a large church in Oklahoma, over 5,000 people in the church, and I was over an area of ministry, and I was only 26 years old. And the executive pastor of the church brought me in his office. He said, here's what I'm looking for from you. I want 30-day goals. I want 3-month goals. I want 6-month goals. And I don't want to know what you're going to do this whole year until next year this time. I said, Jesus. Inside I said, Jesus, help me. So I went to my office. I got me a plan. 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, 1 year. And he said, for everything you do, everything on your agenda, have a date of completion when you plan on doing it, so you'll work towards that day. I said, man, this guy's crazy serious. And you know what? It motivated me. And I got a lot accomplished in my job. And you know what? I thought, well, so this Bible reading thing's the same thing. If you want to be motivated to read this book called the Bible that has 66 books, has lots of chapters and lots of words and lots of stuff that you're not familiar with, you've got to be motivated. Have a Bible reading plan. When I went to Kenneth Hagin's school back in the early 80s, they would give out the Victory Bible reading plan. This is literally what I started with. What I like about it is it has every day of the month, and you check off every day that you complete that reading. And if there's something sticks out in that particular passage, write the reference to that passage on the right-hand side. And I did that. So every day that I did it, I would check it off. And you read Old Testament, Psalm or Proverb, and New Testament every day. Now, this was my pattern I started with. This got me into the Word even after I graduated from my second Bible school. Do you know you can go to Bible school and be a pastor and still not be in the Word yourself? A lot of people are that way, and it shows. So I started doing this. Now I read through the Old Testament every year. This is chronological according to sequence of events. And then I read several, if I'm reading through the Psalms, I read several Psalms in one sitting. And then I usually read through the Psalms a couple of times a year. And then I read through Proverbs a few times a year. And then I also read the New Testament. In the New Testament for me, I read a gospel, and then Acts or Revelation, and then all the epistles every month. Every month. And I've been doing that for a long time. What does that do? It aided motivation for me. So find a good Bible reading plan. Now, you can find these online everywhere. They're 365 days a year Bibles. There are Bible reading plans. In fact, I think the Bible Gateway's got all kinds of plans. The YouVersion Bible, they got lots of plans. Use a plan. If you don't use a plan, you'll be non-motivated, and you'll be doing this, reading your Bible. And where am I going to read today? Let's see. Oh, this is 2 Samuel 22. David's song. That will not keep you motivated. How many hear me? So this is a big book, and you've got to understand it. So find a Bible reading plan. Number 4, include variety in your reading. How many hear what I just said? Variety. In fact, J. Oswald Sanders, there's a book I read about every year entitled Spiritual Leadership. I think the copyright's 1962. J. Oswald Sanders was a wonderful man of God who died in 1992 at age 92. So this was a wonderful book he wrote. It's a classic, really. And if you've been around in the Lord any length of time, you've probably heard of this book. It's worth reading over and over again. But he had a chapter in there on a leader in his reading that really blessed me. And he made this one statement that stuck with me, and I read this the first time in the early 80s. He said, variety is as restful to the mind as to the body. Now think about that. For instance, what if you eat 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. What if you ate exactly the same thing every single day for breakfast, and then that same thing for lunch, and then the exact same thing for dinner? How long would it take you to get tired of it? You wouldn't last just a few days, right? Now, for instance, I like New York strip as a steak. Now, I shouldn't be talking about that because we're on the Daniel fast. I get it. I love a good New York strip cooked just right. Medium. That's me. What if I had that? Now, if I had that breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day, it wouldn't be long. So I don't even want to see a New York strip. Your mind is exactly the same way. If all you do is stay in the same rut mentally, your mind quickly loses interest because it's really smart. In fact, you know what I found out with public speaking? If I just speed up the tempo a little bit, I can keep people's interest. If I slow her down and just kind of talk like this, your mind starts wandering. Where am I going to eat? What am I going to do today? What am I going to do outside in the 64-degree weather? Don't think about it right now. Don't think. You see what I'm saying? But if I just speak, your mind is that way. So variety. Have variety for your mind. Listen to this. Have a study Bible that you read. Listen to me. How many know the Bible is not a Western book? The Bible is an Eastern book, and it has Eastern ideals. And so you've got to know something about the history, the geography, and the makeup of the people of Bible times if you really want to understand what you're reading, either Old or New Testament. There are idioms of expression that we are clueless about in the Western world. That's why a good study Bible is really good. So, in fact, I looked up yesterday, I've actually got 10 study Bibles, I think 10 study Bibles on my iPad. I've got bunches of study Bibles in my office. I've got an office at home, office here. But I use my study Bibles. I'll give you 3 that I really, really like. One of them is Dake's Annotated Reference Bible. There's the New King James Version. Dake died in 1977. He had a photographic memory, but he annotated or put notes beside every single verse of the Bible. So when you buy his Bible, he has the scripture text in the center, but he has 4 columns per page. Interior columns are text, scripture, and the exterior columns on either side and sometimes along the bottom are filled with notes. Geography, history, words. The Old Testament was written in Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Greek and Aramaic. And then the Septuagint is the whole Bible written in Greek. And it's got all kinds of information and things you would never know. And it lights up the Bible for you. I don't know how many times I've been reading my Dates Annotated Reference Bible. I say, wow, I never knew that. God, is that what you were saying to me? It made that much difference. So that's an excellent, excellent Bible, study Bible. Then another one is the Holman Christian Standard Study Bible. And I have that one, and actually that's the one I use now. What I like about that one is really fundamental, but they have so many tidbits of interesting, necessary, and helpful information when you're reading the Bible. It really keeps you interested in what you're reading. If you don't have something like that, your mind, you won't understand half of what you're reading. So that's why it's so important. This is practical stuff, y'all. How many hear me? And then the third one I would emphasize would be the New Spirit-Filled Life Bible. One of the, Jack Hayford edited that from Van Nuys, California. And I had a lot of people that gave some gave some input to it. And one of the guys that wrote actually the Hebrew and Greek words actually signed mine years ago back in the early 90s. So I've got a copy of that. And that is an excellent Bible. Most things that you study after on the spiritual plane, the people aren't spirit-filled, not baptized with the Holy Spirit. So often they don't believe in divine healing, the gifts of the Spirit and things like that. A Bible like that one, or Dake's annotated, boy, they're great Bibles because they believe the Bible just the way it's written. So I have a lot more I could say about that. Really encourage you to get a study Bible. Also, I wanted to mention, I use my iPad. I've had my iPad since, 2000, when did they come out? 2009 or 10. And there's an app called the Olive Tree Bible app. There's also like Logos International. They have an app, and they have all kinds of resources. I use the Olive Tree. It's free to download, and then you just buy the content. I think I have 21 translations of the Bible in mine. And then I've got, like I said, 10 study Bibles, and then commentaries galore. You do this kind of stuff. This one splits the screen, and I have my text, and then I have on my study aids. Y'all, I just get so excited about getting up in the morning just reading. It's like, God, you're so good. I didn't know that meant that. That changed my life today. Thank you for these men of God that helped me. How many know you need that? Variety is as restful to the mind as variety of food is to the body. How many hear me? So I read the Bible in different translations, Old Testament, New Testament. Got all these great translations. Do that, and it will bless you. Here are some tips again from J. Oswald Sanders, Spiritual Leadership. He said, read for spiritual reading and profit. He said, a person's character is reflected by the books he reads, for they are the outward expression of his inner hungers and aspirations. Then he said this, read little that is to be forgotten. Choose books the way you choose friends. Isn't that good? Some people haphazardly read. I've got one friend, that guy probably got thousands of books, but he'll read anything. I won't. I watch what I read. I watch who the author is. I want to know his belief system. Now, sometimes I'll find an antagonist, a person who refutes everything I believe just to see how he's thinking. But I'm aware of it when I pick up the book. Sometimes those are healthy for you because they challenge what you really do believe. If you're a young believer, don't do that. Be immersed in the Word first. How many hear me? But then he goes on to say here, read little that is to be forgotten. Choose books the way you choose friends. Then he said, 5 years from now, listen to this. Your character will be largely determined by the books you read and by the people you associate with. Now, here's what I found out a lot of people do. They graduate from high school or college, or maybe they have an advanced degree, but they stop reading. Don't do that. You know, we have commencement in high school, commencement, college commencement exercise. What does commencement mean? It's not an end. It's a beginning. Why would you stop learning just because you went to school? Huh? In fact, you don't learn anything you need in life hardly when you go to school. There's so much more available. Yes or no? People that are wise spiritual, if you want to be spiritually astute, read your Bible, but read books. Having said that, I keep books going. I read my Bible every morning. I take a good amount of time to read my Bible, Old Testament, Psalm, Proverb, New Testament, and then I read books. I looked yesterday. I've got 7 books going that I'm reading right now, all at the same time. And you know, most people read a book and they don't even finish the books they read. They'll get, a few chapters in and then they won't finish because they're not disciplined. You know how you do that? I read 1 chapter in 1 book, then go in another book and read a chapter or half a chapter. And I'll read maybe 2 books a day, sometimes 3 chapters in different books every day. I got 7 books going. So I read in 1 set of books one day, and then the next day I read another set. What does that do? Variety. My mind can't wait to see what else is going to happen. In fact, sometimes you'll be reading and think, man, I want to read that next chapter. I'm going to wait till tomorrow. What does it do? It motivates you. Y'all, my preaching comes out of this. My life, this is my life. And you know what? When challenges come, you don't know how many times you don't realize you remember things you heard somewhere. Teacher, anybody know Marilyn Hickey? She's up in her 80s now. She said, often when you're reading the Word, you're canning. My mother used to can vegetables in the summertime, tomatoes and corn and cucumbers and, all kinds of stuff, and peas and beans and stuff. And we'd have them all winter long. She said, often when you're reading, you're canning. That is, you're not going to use it right now, but later on the Holy Spirit will bring it back up to your memory. How many know it's true? Well, what if you don't have that reservoir? Then when you had a tough place, there's nothing that comes up. How many know He brings to our remembrance what we put, but we've got to put it in there. Variety, y'all, variety. So I got all these books. I've got over 200 books on my iPad. Besides all of them on my shelves. Why do I do that? When I'm sitting somewhere, I'm reading. I'm reading all the time. I'm listening in my car. Why? I got to put something inside. I never know when something's going to happen. And there's a demand on my spiritual life. How many hear me? 4 things about prayer. Let's talk about this. We're going home. Everybody good? You sure? All right. 4 keys to prayer life. Now, let me talk about your prayer life. We're about to go home. I can say this fairly quickly. God is invisible and unfelt, mostly. How many agree with that? So all the relationships we have in life, I can see my wife, I see my children, my friends, my coworkers. You talk with them, you converse with them, you see their face, they're animated. You see their body language, their facial expressions, yada, yada. You can't do any of that with God. It's all by faith. How are you going to carry on a logical conversation and really have a really great time connecting with someone that's invisible? You connect with God on the basis of His Word. So I've got several things here. Number 1, for prayer, stay alert and awake. It's hard to relate to somebody if you're sleeping every time you try to talk to them. So for me, I stand up and I'll walk. Years ago, I walked my neighborhood early in the morning to pray. I'd put on a coat in the cold or, put on my shorts in the hot. And I just walk. And Jesus said, watch and pray. Just kidding. But my eyes are open and I'm not distracted. I'm praying as I'm walking. And that disciplined me not to go to sleep. Now I can kneel down. This morning I have a certain chair. I put a pillow on it and I kneel down and I pray in that chair. And I don't go to sleep. Because my body has learned I'm going to pray. And if I get groggy, I'm getting up. So stay alert and awake. Relate to God, number 2, on the basis of His Word. How many know your feelings are fickle? 2 Corinthians 4:18 says we don't look at the things that are seen or felt, but the things that are not seen and unfelt. And then 2 Corinthians 5:7 says we walk by faith and not by feeling. So listen, only relate to God on the basis of His Word. My feelings are fickle just like yours. And to be honest, most of the time you don't feel Him. Is that true? How do you relate to somebody you can't see? You relate to Him according to what He said. God and His Word are one. John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The Holy Spirit's called the Spirit of truth. And you relate to the Word, you're relating to your Father. So when I get up in the morning and start praying, I say, Father, good morning. He never slumbers nor sleeps. I say, Lord, you've been awake all night just waiting on me. Thank you. Thank you. And I say, Lord, I just thank you for who you are. I thank you for what you've said. And I'll just tell Him what He said about Himself in His Word. And I've actually got them in the notes online, many other scriptures. And I'll just quote those scriptures, not for Him, but for me. Lord, I'm reminded me of what you said about you. And it helps me relate to Him. Only relate to God on the basis of His Word. And my feelings are fickle just like yours. But if you learn to relate to Him on the basis of the Word, how many know He is the same yesterday, today, and forever? You're falling apart. You're having a hard time. He never changes. Which brings me to number 3, open your heart. There are people, because of their circumstances, because of their upbringing, they have never, ever revealed their insides to a living soul. Not mama, not daddy, not brother, sister, aunt, uncle, cousin, anybody. They're quiet. They're closed. They're withdrawn. See, if you've been raised a certain way, maybe it's an abusive thing, whatever. Or you could just be raised in a family, nobody related to each other in a close way. You can take that physical habit into your relationship with the Lord and never really relate to Him heart to heart. And for me, that was a big deal. And I got to be quick with this because I can talk about it a long time. But when I first came to the Lord at age 18, I was a mess. And I had been a mess all my life. I had this proverbial knot in my throat, emotional knot. I never felt right about me. I was ill at ease. I was an introvert before I met Jesus. I know it sounds crazy, but I was. I wouldn't make eye contact with people. I just had all this stuff, and I never talked to I didn't talk to anybody about it. But when I found out about God, when I found out He knows everything, that nothing is hid from His view, Hebrews 4:13, but all things are naked and open before His eyes. When I read Psalm 139 and found out that He knows me intimately, daylight and dark are equal to Him. He sees me from the inside out. And I remember the first time I was on my floor in my bedroom in my mother's house. I was 18 years old, and I began to cry out, God, I hurt inside, and Lord, I don't know why. I was reading your word, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not doing that, but Lord, I feel this. And this is the first time I opened up. And it's like a dam broke in my life, y'all. It was like my insides, I said first service, it's like my insides were hard wax. And God and His word and the Holy Spirit were like the candle that lit on the wax and began to melt it. And He did that inside me. And you know what? He'll do that for you. Open your heart. Lastly, you change. He doesn't. Learning to pray. Here's what I found out. If you pray every day, you don't have to pray to start with a long time. Just take a few minutes. If you pray every single day, here's what you find out. Most of the time, your feelings are real melancholy, just kind of not there, blasé, because it's early in the morning. But every now and then, you'll get up under the spout where the glory comes out. Woo! 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 I can feel that's good. Most of the time you don't, but you know what I found out? Feelings have to do with what you're experiencing in life. A negative conversation from a friend. You know, a tough thing that's happening on the job. Something going on in your life, with a marriage, with your children, with whatever. And it's just bothering you, a financial issue you're dealing with. Those things affect you emotionally. Is it true? Sure it is. Well, those affect your prayer time and affect your ability to feel or not feel. Don't be moved by the lack of feeling. Sometimes God's done the most in my life when I felt the least. But if you'll have a regular time with God, I tell you, y'all, I have to pinch myself, say, is this the Mitch Horton I used to know? Because something happened. Somebody got inside of me and started changing who I am. It's bringing me closer year after year. How many want that in your life? Stand up on your feet.